So we're going to go on to the Polyvagal Theory, and I want to start by sharing with you a quote from Steve Porges. When I read this quote, I realized that I had really found a home for my work. I think it's just so beautiful, and it really represents who Steve Porges is. So he says, if we want individuals to feel safe, we don't accuse them of doing something wrong or bad. We explain to them how their body responded, how their responses are adaptive, how we need to appreciate this adaptive feature, and how the client needs to understand that this adaptive feature is flexible and can change in different contexts. Then we can use our wonderfully creative and integrative brain to develop a narrative that treats our atypical behaviors not as bad, but as understandable in terms of adaptive functions that may often be heroic. So here we see how the creator of polyvagal theory is really helping us to shift paradigms into appreciating that trauma and addictive responses, dissociation, and getting caught up in the trauma feedback loop with self-harming behaviors are actually adaptive features in our nervous system if we understand them in the context in which they occurred. And then we can go on to say, well, these adaptive features are flexible, right? We can actually shift out of that trauma feedback loop with dissociation and addictions when we find enough safety in the context in which we're living. So safety really is our North Star in the polyvagal model. Safety is what informs everything that comes after it. And so that's part of why we want to really pace with this course and take your time to take in the material, to feel into the felt sense of it in your body, and to really remember the sense of hopefulness and joy that comes from appreciating how bodies work, how bodies are designed to help us to survive. So this quote comes from Porges' pocketbook that he wrote in 2017. It's a great little book to read because it's a series of conversations that Steve has with people over time. And the last chapter in that book is a conversation that he has with a good friend of mine, Serge Pringle, who is a focusing-oriented therapist. And Serge actually introduced me to Steve Porges, so I owe him a lot for that. And then here's another quote from Steve that really brings in Gendlin's work in a way that we can see how we're crossing the felt sense work with polyvagal theory. So feelings of safety are not equivalent to objective measurements of safety, which could pragmatically be defined as the removal of threat. Feeling safe, says Steve, is more akin to the felt sense described by Eugene Gendlin. Although Gendlin, as a philosopher and psychologist, was not physiologically oriented, he described a felt sense and shift not just as a mental experience, but also a physical one. And that is indeed true. I mean, Gene talked a lot about the physical release that you can see in the body when people move from a dysregulated state into a more grounded ventral state. We just look different. Our body is more relaxed, it's more open, our face is more open and friendly, and we can feel that as human beings. So polyvagal theory is about the vagus nerve. And here's my favorite picture, actually, of the vagus nerve. You can see how long it is. It's the longest cranial nerve in the body and extends right from the base of the brain stem right down into our gut. And 80% of the information that comes up into the brainstem is about the body. It's about what's happening in our organs in the body. And that information is coming up constantly. And then our vagus nerve is alive and really helping us to monitor how safe we are in the world. It's a wonderful thing. It's an amazing way in which bodies work. So Steve has this new word. It's interesting how when we shift paradigms, we create new words. So you see this with Gendlin, where he created the term felt sense because there wasn't a term for that, because we weren't really connected enough to embodiment to be able to really develop a language that was more specific to what's happening in the body. So this is a really, I think, wonderful thing. When we shift paradigms, we're moving into these new territories, and we need new words to describe what we're experiencing. So the word neuroception it describes that way in which the vagus nerve, the process of that nerve, is to constantly monitor. Are we safe? Are we not safe? And I think of it kind of like in a similar way to the way that the body monitors temperature. So we're not aware of that because this is all happening in a primitive part of the brain, in the brainstem. And so we don't think to ourselves, oh, I think I'm getting sick and I better raise my temperature. The body knows how to do that. It knows how to do many things that we're not consciously aware of. And one of those things is the process of neuroception. The body just knows how to watch to see whether we need to shift into a state that helps us in a better way to be able to manage and survive the situations that we're in. So our bodies are constantly responding to the environment and monitoring. And the polyvagal theory in shifting paradigms, we've talked about this a little bit right from the very beginning in Module 1, how we're looking at shifting away from the diagnostic and statistical manual and a kind of pathologizing model into a model that's really informed by the wisdom of the body. And so this is the autonomic nervous system, where we can really tap into learning more about how that system works in the body. And so Steve talks about a visceral sensitivity training, and this is a way of mapping your state and how this helps us to kind of understand the symptoms. It normalizes our understanding of how bodies respond in different states of threat. And we can develop these ways of really helping people through neural exercises to be able to ground in a way that helps us to settle inside, to feel safer in the body and in our own experiencing in our lives. And we've done some of these trainings already in felt sensing. And we're going to do one in this module called the Felt Sense Polyvagal Grounding Practice. And this is the basic practice in the model where we're working with neuroception. So learning how to find out where we are in the nervous system, how safe we feel. And then also working with interoception, what's happening in the full felt sense in the body, in how you're experiencing your life right now. And so, of course, when we connect in with the autonomic nervous system, this is really enhancing our focusing practice. This is actually a slide from Steve Porges. I asked him if I could use it because I thought it was a really good way of introducing the social engagement system. So this is another one of Porges' contributions to our understanding of what it feels like and what happens in the body when we're in a ventral state in the body. And so he calls this the face-heart connection. Such a lovely way of understanding how the social engagement system works. So at birth, mammals have this bidirectional neural communication between the face and the heart. And this focuses on this process of suck and swallow and breathe and vocalize. And this forms the core of what Steve calls the social engagement system. And certain metabolic demands and perceived danger and life threat and illness retract this social engagement system, which results in a face that is not social and a physiological state that promotes defensive behaviors. So, for example, when I first got here, it was really important to me to make contact with Asa, who's helping out with filming, and to make sure that I could have eye contact with him and see into his face and smile, and he had a smile back towards me. This is us engaging in this social engagement system. And it's very important because it helps my nervous system to be able to settle and to feel safe enough in the room to really be able to engage with you. And without that, I could still do it because I know how to do it now, but it would be harder because my body would be reading more of a sense of some kind of threat or discomfort. So I would have to come inside and engage a little bit more with my own neuroception and interoception in order to be able to settle. But luckily, I didn't have to do that. So these things are really important to be aware of, because the more we can be in a place of welcoming connection with other people and inviting people to feel safe with us, the more we create a better world. And we certainly want to be able to do that when we're in our role, our job of being a therapist or a coach or a somatic body worker, whatever it is that we're doing, a teacher, a doctor, whatever you're doing, where you're bringing in this kind of a model where you're working with the body, with the beautiful ways that the body knows how to adapt and really encourage social engagement. So polyvagal theory was created way back, actually, in 1994. And it was really Deb Dana who helped us to translate the theory into a kind of language that we could really use as trauma therapists. And we have a lot to be grateful to Deb's work. Then she calls this the science of safety, such a beautiful term. And so we're really working at understanding and deepening our sense of the autonomic nervous system and how this shapes our capacity to create a safe and grounded felt sense inside the body. And remember that when we don't have that sense of safety in the body, we can't feel into a full felt sense. And then our level of experiencing in Jenlin's experiencing scale that we worked with back in module 2 is really inhibited, right? Because we need to be able to feel into the sense of grounding in the body, to really feel into the whole experience, which then brings us into presence. So Steve Porges really discovered this place in the autonomic nervous system that he then called the dorsal branch of the vagus. And it's actually a very interesting story how that happened. He was working with premature babies. And what they predicted when these babies were in hospital because they were ill, they predicted that their heart rates would be increased and they would be up in a kind of flight-fight response trying to manage the illness that they had. But in actual fact, their heart rates were lower. And that became a place where Steve was really curious to understand what was going on.